Hello and welcome back to another episode of Indistinct Chatter. I'm Aliza, and holy crap, guys, a lot is happening right now. Kanye West released an apology ad for his anti-Semitic comments and actions. People are sharing what radicalized them in a viral trend on social media. It's freezing freaking cold out there, yet thousands upon thousands braved the cold for the first major general strike in the U.S. in 80 years. Another U.S. citizen has been killed in broad daylight. Oh, and some are saying we're in the first stages of something that feels a lot like a civil fracture. First up, on January 26th, Ye, formerly Kanye West, released an apology in a Wall Street Journal ad for his anti-Semitic comments and actions. Titled, "To Those I've Hurt," his apology includes some mental health disclosures, renouncing anti-Semitism, apologizing to the Black community, and his commitment to treatment. Some are calling it opportunistic because he is set to release a new album titled Bully soon. In a post that I saw that shared Ye's apology, a bunch of people in the comments are telling him to shut up or saying like, "I don't care, too late." And yeah, to an extent, I agree. Your actions have real consequences. He hurt real people with his words and actions. He encouraged a lot of hate, especially with his platform. I'm not saying that we have to welcome him home with open arms and a warm meal, but I don't know, leave a key under the rock, you know? Even if an apology is opportunistic, if someone's crawling out of that dark space and being vulnerable, I don't think we should push them back. That's how they end up staying stubborn in their hate. And others looking at that just see another example of the extreme whatever not being as kind as they preach. I don't know the right move, but for me, meeting them with hate and darkness is just not conducive with the messages I preach, you know? At this point, I'll let his actions speak for himself. Maybe I'll eat my own words. Only time will tell. So there's a trend making its way on social media, and this trend isn't new. I've been seeing it over and over, regurgitated for a while now, but I've noticed it's picking back up again. It's the "what radicalized you" trend. Basically, the prompt is "what radicalized you?" Then there's either text or a video or photos revealing what quote unquote radicalized them. Lately, it's a little less humorous. It's a little more sarcastic or quiet rage-esque. Some people say working retail during the pandemic or learning how little billionaires pay in taxes are what radicalized them. It's kind of like letting people say, "Hey, the system is broken," without being some sort of TED Talk speaker or something. It's not about promoting extremism or violence. It's just kind of this cultural shorthand for awakening, disillusionment, or losing faith in how things are supposed to work, not necessarily a political statement. It's just putting a name to a moment or experience or a realization that shifted how someone saw the world. It could be how they saw the healthcare system, how they saw reality TV. It's about how they've become more cynical, more politically aware lately, or more opinionated. Like something just clicked for them. So I thought, since this is my podcast, I would share what radicalized me. I have some family and friends, I say friends loosely here, who say I'm, quote, too sensitive, or I'm a woke libtard. Love that one. As opposed to what? Asleep? Should I not be awake? I don't get it. And I find it funny when I think about what actually did radicalize me. Because it wasn't some big turning event. It wasn't a specific book or TV show or news segment or anything dramatic at all. It certainly wasn't the devil. It wasn't drag queens. It wasn't sharing bathrooms with transgender people. It was music. It was my parents, and it was church. First up, music. Now, I'm not talking about the obvious, like Rage Against the Machine or System of a Down or Rise Against, or any more current musicians and bands like Monrovia or Jesse Wells. These are all great, and they definitely add to my radicalization, if you will. But honestly, the music I'm referring to is the music I listened to growing up as a kid. And no, I'm not talking about Shania, not Britney, not even the Backstreet Boys. I'm talking about boomer music. That's right, boomer. music. And probably some older Gen Xers. Your music, boomers and Gen Xers, was super woke. The golden age of music is considered the 60s and 70s, where a large portion of your music was largely driven by the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, and the counterculture. It's largely considered where protest music was invented. Bob Dylan, Phil Ochs, CCR, Marvin Gaye, The Doors, Sam Cooke, Jefferson Airplane, Jimi Hendrix, the Rolling Stones, the list goes on and on. They weren't subtle with it either. It wasn't up to interpretation. They sang openly about war, racism, class inequality, government hypocrisy, and distrust of authority. For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield always comes to mind during times like these. Their song is about police cracking down on young people in Los Angeles at the time, and it's become an anthem, really. It names the tension that everyone was feeling, and it tells people, hey, you're not imagining this. Something is wrong. And although Janis Joplin didn't explicitly write or sing songs about policy, she was a woman who was loud, messy, sexual, and emotionally unfiltered in a male-dominated industry. That alone was rebellion. She embodied the counterculture's rejection of gender norms, respectability, and restraint. Then, as we moved into the later 70s and the 80s, that protest energy didn't just disappear. That's where we got punk and early hip-hop music, which were both angrier, more confrontational, more explicit about police brutality, poverty, and government failure. Think the Sex Pistols, Dead Kennedys, NWA, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Black Flag. They weren't asking politely. These musicians were telling you that something was deeply wrong. And as a kid, I absorbed the next wave without even realizing it. I loved Green Day, Neil Young, and the Chicks. These are artists who openly criticized the government propaganda, the 24-hour news cycle, and the Iraq War, all while being told to shut up and just sing. Remember how dirty they did the Chicks? And honestly, if you zoom out even further, this quote-unquote radical music goes back even before the boomers. In the early 1900s through the 1920s, a large amount of music centered on the labor movement, about unsafe working conditions, exploitation, and the lack of workers' rights. In the 30s, Woody Guthrie wrote a little tune called This Land Is Your Land. Most people think it's just a cute, simple, patriotic tune when it's actually a critique of private property and the government's failure to care for the poor. So yeah, music. Music my parents listened to while I was a kid taught me to question authority, pay attention, and notice who has power and who doesn't. So along with music that my parents listened to, my parents also radicalized me. That's right, Mom and Dad, you did. And not just your music. Not in some big, dramatic political way. They didn't sit me down and give me some manifesto or tell me who to vote for or anything. They just lived authentically, and I observed. My parents never followed strict gender norms that I would see sometimes at my friends' houses. There was never the whole, this is for boys, this is for girls talk. I was a bit of a tomboy or whatever you call it. I think that might be an outdated term. I don't know. My dad taught me some basic boxing and wrestling moves when I was little. Nothing wild, just kind of fun. And basically, like, this is how you punch without breaking your hand. Although my foot did go through a glass cabinet door once. My dad and I would watch the quote-unquote boy cartoons like Pinky and the Brain and Gargoyles. My dad himself wore his hair in a ponytail quite often with a sparkly hair tie. I remember it vividly. It was white with sparkles. And that was probably most likely my mom's or mine. He also would wear an earring, one single earring, and it had a garnet in it for my mom and me because we're January babies. They never spoke openly with hatred towards others. I never heard my parents really talk shit about anyone, especially none of their friends, none of their family members. None of that was modeled for me. And honestly, my parents led with what people would probably refer to as gentle parenting these days, or a form of it maybe. I was never spanked, never hit, rarely was I yelled at. And this wasn't because my parents didn't believe in discipline. Believe me, I got my fair share of toys taken away and I got grounded quite a bit. But it was because my dad chose to break the cycle after dealing with his own abusive father. That alone, as a kid, knowing that teaches you something. Also, again, with the non-gender norms, my dad was the one who liked to garden and taught me about gardening. My mom was the one with her motorcycle license, not my dad, and she had the stick shift car. They both instilled in me a deep respect for all living things, and not in some preachy, hippy-dippy way, just how we treat animals, plants, people, how everything and everyone has value. Both of my parents have worked my entire life, and because childcare is expensive, they would off and on work opposite shifts so one of them could always be with me. That's a huge sacrifice, but they made it work. There was no talk about pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but through what they were doing, I was able to see those sacrifices, their cooperation, and their exhaustion. I mean, maybe not at the time when I was a kid, but looking back on it now that I've been growing up in this world, I'm able to see that. I was also one of the lucky kids who got to swear. Scandalous. My dad taught me how words are just words until you give them meaning. So swearing was fine. Flicking the middle finger was fine. Swearing at someone or using language with intention to harm, no, that was not okay. And not just swear words, just language in general that was harmful. I was always taught how intent mattered more than appearances. My parents also taught me to question everything. Don't just accept things because that's how they are. Certainly don't trust someone just because they wear a badge or a uniform. Never blindly trust politicians or salesmen, and definitely don't idolize them. In fact, my mom used to drive me around as a kid and show me where her friends lived and where she worked and where they worked. That way I would know of safe places to go if I was ever lost or taken, because a lot of kids were being taken around that time. Interestingly enough, she didn't show me the police station. Instead, she told me to look for the blue H signs because hospitals will always help you. And above all else, I was taught to be honest. Honest with them and honest with myself, because no one can help you if you're not being honest. So it wasn't a politician or celebrity or news anchor who radicalized me. It was my mom and it was my dad. I was raised to value empathy over obedience, curiosity over compliance, and integrity over authority. Radical stuff, right? And speaking of radical, church. My church radicalized me. Wild. I grew up evangelical Lutheran, which tends to get a lot of side eyes, and honestly, I get it. Some of the stereotypes were true when I grew up. Lutherans are known for being passive aggressive. There's this whole joke about Lutherans being super duper polite, but avoiding direct conflict at all costs. Also, apparently, Lutherans are obsessed with coffee and casseroles. Guilty on both accounts. Other denominations criticize the ELCA, saying they're too liberal or too progressive. And maybe that's why I say I was radicalized there too. Don't get me wrong, it's not this progressive paradise for everyone. I was incredibly lucky with my whole church and religious experience in general growing up. Even Bible camp was amazing for me. I have only good memories, which I know a lot of people don't. I had a pastor who welcomed not only my challenges, but anyone's challenges that they brought to the table about faith and the Bible. He told me Jesus even challenged the system. Interesting. Jesus challenged religious legalism, overturned social hierarchies, subverted economic and political powers. He was very direct and confrontational with authorities. Basically, I was taught how radical Jesus really was. Pastor Thompson spoke openly about loving each other and about how a house of worship is meant for everyone, regardless of skin color, bank account, who you love, or where you come from. He talked about the Bible in nuance and about how it's been translated and interpreted over and over again throughout history, mostly by men. And therefore, he taught us how to think critically. This is also where I learned that being a good person isn't complicated. It's not, guys. You don't have to belong to a church or even have faith to be a good person. It's about how you treat others, all living things, not just people who look like you, believe like you, or vote like you. So when people assume church would have made me more rigid, more judgmental, or more closed off, it actually did the opposite. Pastor Thompson taught me to have an open heart and an open mind, to lead with empathy, to value people by their actions, not all that other bullshit. And if that's considered radical now, well, I've been radical for decades then, and honestly, I feel bad for you if you aren't. So yeah, what radicalized me? Music, my parents, and church. Crazy, right? Moving on January 23rd, it was around negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit in Minneapolis, but thanks to wind chill, the temps dropped even further, making it feel closer to negative 30, sometimes colder. And when I read that, the feels like, I was like, okay, so it's negative 30 then, right? Why say negative 20 if it feels colder? Shouldn't it be what it feels like? So I have a quick little fun fact for you. When the weather report says feels like, it's actually measuring how fast your body loses heat. That's your wind chill, which I thought wind chill just meant how cold it was when the wind picked up, you know? And I wasn't totally off, but I wasn't right either. Wind moves heat away from your skin faster than still, stagnant air, obviously. That makes the air feel colder than what your thermometer is reading. So basically, our thermometers are reading the temp when the air is still. That's the actual temperature. That whole feels like temp is the wind chill, and that's measuring moving air, stripping away the insulating layer of heat around your body. Makes sense, seems simple, but I didn't know, so I thought I'd share a fun little factoid to keep in your pocket when you need to have mundane small talk at work or something. And even with it being that cold outside, an estimated 50,000 people took to the streets of Minneapolis to start the first day of the general strike. The last time we saw anything like this on this scale here in the US was during the massive strike wave of 1946, almost 80 years ago. Back then, 4.5 million workers walked picket lines across the country in order to maintain their standard of living after World War II. The cost of living was rising, but their wages were falling after the war ended. 6 cities experienced full citywide shutdowns: Rochester, New York, Stamford and Hartford, Connecticut, Camden, New Jersey, Oakland, California, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Oakland strike began with 400 mostly female retail clerks who were on strike demanding union recognition and better wages, specifically at Conn's and Hastings, which were major department stores at the time. The entire 1946 strike wave led to Congress passing the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, overriding President Truman's veto. This significantly restricted the power of unions, including limiting solidarity strikes and coordinated multi-industry walkouts. Because of those restrictions, traditional union-led general strikes, the ones where workers across multiple industries walk out together for a common cause, became extremely difficult under federal law. It made citywide and nationwide general strikes rare, which is why it's been so long since we've seen one. That is, until the current resurgence of labor militancy leading into 2026. Labor militancy. What is that? I didn't know, so I had to look it up. It basically means workers and unions becoming more willing to take bold, organized action to defend their rights and challenge system inequities. Not violence, not chaos, just collective, coordinated pressure. The general strike in Minneapolis is one of the first major visible examples of this renewed energy. Tens of thousands of people braved extreme cold, not just to protest isolated issues, but to show solidarity across their community and honestly across the country as other cities and states join in. This strike is centered on opposition to expanding ICE operations, deportation tactics, and deaths linked to federal immigration enforcement. Protesters are calling for ICE to leave the state, accountability for federal agents, and an end to additional ICE funding and enforcement practices. People have shown solidarity by marching in the streets and committing to an economic blackout where people skip work, school, and don't shop. It's a message that says collective action still matters, even in a country where large-scale strikes have been so legally and logistically constrained for decades. So, why now? Other presidents deported people too. In fact, President Obama was literally named deporter-in-chief. Millions, yes, millions, were deported under his administration. It's not like deportations didn't start until 2026, right? Well, what's happening now is different. It's how it's happening and who it's affecting. During the Obama years, deportations were largely carried out through existing immigration courts, civil proceedings, and policy frameworks that, at least on paper, prioritized people with serious criminal convictions. Yeah, but you people weren't protesting back then. Wrong. Wrong. There were massive protests back then, too, especially from immigrant rights groups. These protests pushed back and forced changes. Big changes. DACA exists because of that pressure. And if you're unsure what DACA is, it stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's a policy that provides renewal 2-year protection from deportation and work authorization to eligible, undocumented immigrants who arrived in the country as children. It doesn't grant official legal status, but it allows hundreds of thousands of dreamers, as they're called, to live and work legally under temporary protections. Keyword here, legally. What we're seeing now is a major shift. This isn't just about how many people are deported. It's about expanded federal enforcement operations, heavily armed ICE raids, people being detained and even killed during encounters with federal agents, and entire communities feeling occupied rather than governed. When a U.S. citizen can be killed during an immigration enforcement action, that crosses the line for a lot of people. Normally, that would have crossed the line for a lot of the don't tread on me people, but I digress. This protest, this movement, is also about visibility. Social media, live streams, and instant documentation means people are watching all of this happen in real time. We see it before the press release even. We see families being separated, children used as bait, workplaces raided, and people being shot dead all live on our phones. So yeah, deportations have existed and people protested it before too. But this is about federal power expanding outward, local consent shrinking, and communities coming together to scream, "This isn't normal, and we aren't going to pretend it is." Amongst all this, though, is the community coming together. Labor unions, faith leaders, students, service workers, undocumented families, and citizens alike are all showing up to support each other. I just saw that the Leaning Tower of Pizza in Minneapolis, they received an order from someone who doesn't even live in Minneapolis. They asked that their pizzas that they ordered be given to protesters. And they're not alone. A bunch of places are doing this. Teachers are bringing food to the homes of their students because children, especially those who are not white, are afraid to leave their homes. I saw one school say that their attendance record dropped from 90% to 60% because of the fear of being abducted or worse. I'd say the kids are not all right, wouldn't you? I intended for this podcast to stay away from politics as much as possible because, frankly, I'm not a political expert. I know that there are hundreds of other things going on to make one law happen or whatever. It's not always cut and dry like we think it is. A lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of tit for tat. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. I also know that we are fundamentally biased. Everyone is. Cognitive biases are inherent to how our brains process information and make quick decisions in complex environments. So they're not necessarily always bad, but they can lead to unconscious prejudices and irrational decisions and the spread of misinformation. And that's what I didn't want to do. And honestly, on a two-party scale that we seem to be forced to abide by, I don't fall into either party. In fact, in high school, and I recently took another similar test, I was 50-50 Republican and Democrat. Obviously, on a scale of liberal versus conservative, I lean more liberal. I care about the environment, our water, our air, our plants, our animals. I care about children being fed, clothed, and schooled, regardless of their home lives, their skin, their religion, whatever. I believe in believing what you want, in loving who you want, and that the government shouldn't get involved. I mean, unless it's pedophilia. That's something I'm not on board with. I believe the press shouldn't be censored, but maybe should be held accountable for portraying opinion as fact-based news. I believe you should have the right to your own body. And I believe the Constitution was designed to keep politicians and lawmakers accountable by establishing the rule of law, separating powers, and creating specific checks and balances, ensuring no official is above the law. But if talking about what's happening in the world and calling out the disregard for everything we've been spoon-fed our entire lives and disregarding our own Constitution that people have died to protect is political, then I guess I'm political, and I guess this is a political podcast. I don't know how wanting basic fundamental rights and for people to be held accountable for their wrongdoings is wrong, but go off, I guess. And that brings me to what happened on January 24th to Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old intensive care nurse at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs Medical Center. Alex was a dedicated caregiver with no significant criminal history, by the way. I want to be very clear before I say anything else. What I'm about to describe is based on video footage that I watched myself from multiple angles. This is just what I personally saw. So when people say, wait for the facts, what they often mean is ignore your own eyes. And I'm not doing that, okay? I see it. I don't need someone to tell me what I see. I can see it. To me, it's not up to interpretation. It's right there. So the first thing I see in the video is Pretti filming Border Patrol agents with his phone. He's moving toward them after he sees an agent shove a woman to the ground. It appears more so that he's moving toward them to help the woman. Pretti had both of his hands visible, a phone or a camera in one hand and the other hand empty. And that's when agents confronted him. I then see agents spray mace or pepper spray at Pretti's face and the other two people trying to get out of the situation, one of them being the one who was shoved to the ground, and the other person, presumably their friend. Agents then forcibly take Pretti to the ground and they spray him more. Several more agents show up, and several of those agents appear to be on top of him. Then the first shots are fired. Then I hear several more while he was already pinned and motionless on the ground. It's hard to watch. Pretti was legally licensed to carry a firearm, and a gun was recovered at the scene, but video evidence indicates that he was holding a phone or a camera, not his gun, in the moments leading up to the shooting. Federal officials have since said that the agents were acting in self-defense, claiming Pretti resisted and had a handgun. But the videos I see contradict that, and his family insists he was trying to help people and that he was not a threat. To me, it appears he was inserting himself to help someone, keeping his hands visible to show he was not a threat. And in this case, the NRA isn't even sharing the narrative that we're hearing from our own federal government. The NRA issued a statement on January 25th condemning federal officials' response to the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti. This was in response to a social media post by Trump-appointed First Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley, who suggested federal agents were, quote, likely justified in shooting anyone who approaches law enforcement while armed. The NRA's exact quote says, "This sentiment from the First Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California is dangerous and wrong. Responsible public voices should be awaiting a full investigation, not making generalizations and demonizing law-abiding citizens." This shooting has sparked national outrage, protests, and growing bipartisan calls for a full independent investigation into how and why a U.S. citizen was killed by federal agents during an enforcement operation. And this isn't the first. We all remember Renee Nicole Good, who was shot and killed by ICE agents. She was driving away. Yes, away. Please just actually look at the video, no audio. Imagine it has nothing to do with ICE or politics. She was driving away and she was shot through her windshield and prevented medical care. Before that, Keith Porter of Los Angeles was fatally shot by an off-duty ICE agent on December 31st after the agent claimed Keith was holding a rifle. Those are just a few of the recent U.S. citizens who were killed. So as of recording, just less than a month into the year, 2 citizens have been fatally shot and killed by ICE agents, and at least 6 other people have reportedly died in ICE custody already. We aren't even a month into this year. So yeah, Safe to say I'm pissed, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm frustrated. Staying out of it is honestly, to me, cowardly at this point. I know it's hard, but it's only going to get harder. What's the saying? Um, if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. I know it's corny, but I mean, it's true. And I'm not trying to make anyone change their minds. That's not how it works. I know that. But supporting what's happening is honestly just blind loyalty to power. And that isn't strength. That is obedience dressed up as patriotism. You're literally letting people who do not know or care about you tell you that what you see with your own eyes is a lie. They're targeting people who are filming them, anyone who looks like they're not from here. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. It's not okay and it's not right. And I just hope that people start trusting themselves more than the government and the media. Trust yourself. Trust the person who it happened to. If you can't trust yourself or your friends or your family or your neighbors, you're all alone. Because those people talking into mics on TV, they're not talking to you. They're talking to someone who benefits from this, and you don't benefit from this. Just because it's not on your streets doesn't mean it's not real or not worth caring about. And I get not wanting to watch someone be shot. It's horrendous. We shouldn't have to see that. If you don't want to, don't. I'm not telling you to watch it. It shouldn't be happening. Protect your peace when you can. But there are other ways to find out what's really happening. Talking about it without being accusatory or stubborn in what you think is already happening, that's a start. Try watching other news stations, not just your go-to. Media is biased, remember? Take what they're all saying and really sit and think about it. Honestly, try watching what other countries are reporting on about us. Take politics out of all of this and really sit and think about if you agree with what's happening or not. You can be multifaceted. In fact, that's better. If we all think the same, we're just as fucked. You have every right to believe in immigration reform and deportation while also believing that what is happening and what you're seeing is wrong. You can also change your mind. Changing your mind means growth. Maybe you weren't that invested. Maybe you didn't care much. And maybe now you're like, I don't like this. This is icky. Go with that. Why does it feel icky? Get to the bottom of it. At the end of it all, we are the ones that are all in this together. Okay? And I'm sorry to add more to the heaviness, but here we go. Do you remember when I read my horoscope situation from the CoStar app? I read it during my 2026 predictions episode. It said, quote, some major shit might happen. Neptune and Uranus are exactly where they were during the American Civil War. But don't think about it too hard. History is a spiral, not a circle. I follow a lot of astrologists online, and that's what I keep hearing from them too. Planets are in the same position as they were during the Civil War, blah, blah, blah. Then I see people comparing what's happening now to a lot of other horrendous parts of our history. So, because I started spiraling, I paused, breathed in deep, and then I did a little digging. I found that history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but history does have similar themes that come around. A spiral, if you will, or a rhyme. There's this book called The Fourth Turning, An American Prophecy. It came out in 1997, but the authors, William Strauss and Neil Howe, argue that history moves in 80 to 100-year cycles. Each cycle has about a 20-year turning or season. So the first turning, aka spring, is called the high. It's where institutions are strong, individualism is weak. Think post-World War II era. This is where society has a collective sense of purpose and a desire to build a new order after the previous crisis. The second turning, or summer, is called the awakening. This is when institutions are challenged. Personal spirituality, individualism, and autonomy rises. Think the consciousness revolution of the 1960s and 70s, where young activists were rebelling against the establishment. Then we move into the third turning, fall, the unraveling. This is when institutions are weak and distrusted. Individualism is strong. There's a lot of pessimism about the future. This is also often referred to as the long boom. and the start of culture wars. Think the Reagan Revolution. This is when the collective mantra became more government is the problem, which led to a massive push for deregulation and tax cuts that favored individual wealth over institutional strength. The yuppie culture, very materialistic times, all that. It's where we began to really see a red state versus blue state divide. Issues like abortion, gun rights, and religion, they all became no compromise arguments. And we started getting CNN and MTV and then the internet. So now instead of everyone watching the same 3 channels, we started being able to choose the information we wanted to receive, often reinforcing our own views. Finally, the fourth turning is winter, the crisis. The existing order collapses, society rebuilds with a new collective focus. This is a very decisive era of destruction and upheaval, often involving war or revolution in response to an existential threat to the nation's survival. During this period, there's a collective action where personal sacrifice for the common good begins to emerge. The last previous American crisis was the period spanning the Great Depression and World War II. Those began in 1929 and 1939. So we're getting close to that 100-year mark that they predicted, right? But that's not all. The authors predicted that the next fourth turning, remember they published this in 1997. The fourth turning would begin in the early 2000s. What happened in the early 2000s? 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis, just to name 2. 9/11 didn't fundamentally change how we lived or were governed necessarily, but it did lead to more patriotism as consumerism, and it did lead to more distrust of institutions like intelligence agencies. The 2008 financial crisis is widely said to be the final snap that ended the unraveling period, and it pushed us into the current fourth turning that we are in. Howe has a sequel that came out in 2023 called The Fourth Turning is Here. He now predicts that the current period of polarization will reach its climax and end by the early 2030s. The theory suggests that the outcome of the crisis depends on the choices made during this period of great peril. So depending on how we act and stand for ourselves and our nation right now, we might head into a new golden age or societal fragmentation. Now, I'm not saying that they are fortune tellers, and I'm not trying to add to your doom spiral, but it is interesting and it does align with the whole saying of how history repeats itself or rhymes or spirals back around. And on the bright side, every previous fourth turning period in the US eventually led to real expansions of rights and protections like the end of child labor, Social Security, labor laws, the GI Bill, and civil rights legislation, just to name a few. None of that happened because people stayed quiet or waited for things to magically get better. Ordinary people organized, protested, went on strike, voted, and showed up for each other even when it wasn't convenient or safe. Right now, we are seeing people paying closer attention. We're talking, we're questioning institutions. There's this saying that I absolutely hate, and I would hear it at my last job all the time. This is just how it's always been. Yeah, well, it's broken. And that's not a good enough answer. So if history is a spiral or a rhyme, that doesn't mean we're doomed to repeat the worst parts. To me, it means we are capable of repeating the wins. So yeah, I'm sorry, I went heavy on this episode. If you stuck with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what radicalized you. Have you read The Fourth Turning? Or do you recommend any other books that are relevant to what I talked about today? I want this to be a safe space, so even if you wholeheartedly disagreed with anything I said, please let me know. You can email me or DM me or leave a comment. I try to always see where someone is coming from, so I do my best to remain respectful. So I just ask that you do the same. If not, I'm not your boss. Do it up. If that makes you feel better, have at it. If you liked this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, leave a comment, all that good stuff. I will try my hardest to bring more uplifting stories or information, or maybe just like a fun conspiracy to take your mind off of what's happening for a brief moment so you can reset and realign. Stay safe. Look out for yourself. Look out for your friends. Look out for your family. We'll chat next week. I love ya. Love you. Bye.